They say every predator knows its prey. But in the concrete jungle of secrets at the FBI, Special Agent Cassandra Thorne was the apex predator. Cold, methodical, and incorruptible, she was the woman who found order in chaos. Her new target, the Spectre. A name whispered in the shadows, a criminal empire without a face. The problem? She already knows that face. She's already been in those arms. To the world, he is a monster. To her, he is the memory of whiskey, sea salt, and an anonymous night that was meant to be forgotten, but instead branded her soul. Now, the hunt has begun, and the only clue that can lead Cassandra to her target is a photograph that condemns her, forever linking her to the man she swore to bring to justice. He knows who she is, and he isn't running. He is guiding her. This is not a story about right and wrong. It's about the gray area between obsession and duty, where an adversary becomes your only confidant. It's the story of a man who built an empire to protect himself from the world, and the woman who becomes his only weakness, and perhaps his only salvation. Leave a shushing emoji in the comments if you've ever kept a secret that could change everything, and follow to dive into a world where loyalty is a weapon and trust is the most dangerous game of all. Get ready for the story of the agent who had to capture a ghost without realizing she had already been captured by him. The air in the FBI's crisis room was a thin mixture of stale coffee, cold metal, and ambition. To Special Agent Cassandra Thorne, it was the smell of home, a sanctuary of order and logic where every problem had a solution, every chaos, a pattern. She was in control, always, until that moment. After 6 months of tracking data across 3 continents, we finally have a face, announced Assistant Director Hansen, his voice resonating with the gravity of a declaration of war. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Spectre. The grainy security camera image solidified on the 70-inch screen at the front of the room. A man leaving a boutique hotel on the Amalfi Coast, the Italian sun carving sharp shadows across his face. He wore a light linen suit, no tie, the epitome of carefree elegance. Cassandra Thorne's world didn't crumble with a bang. It unraveled in silence. The sound in the room, the held breaths of the other agents, the subtle click of the projector became a distant hum, white noise drowning out the scream rising in her throat. That man, it couldn't be. Logic, the foundation upon which she had built her entire life, rebelled against the image. That was a ghost, a memory wrapped in the warmth of a summer night, a secret she held like a hot ember in her chest. He wasn't supposed to exist in her world, let alone at the center of the biggest investigation of her career. The smell of whiskey and sea salt, the roughness of a 2-day-old beard against her skin. His voice, a baritone that vibrated not in her ears, but in her chest, talking about stars and forgotten empires. Thorne, you're in charge. Hansen's voice pulled her back from the edge of the abyss. What are your initial thoughts? Training took over. Years of compartmentalization, of suppressing the self to serve the duty, erected a wall of ice around the panic that threatened to consume her. She felt her heart hammer against her ribs, a caged bird, but her voice came out steady, sharp. Where did the image come from? What's the exact date and time? She asked, her eyes fixed on the screen, forcing herself to see a target, not the only man who had ever made her forget who she was. 3 weeks ago, 0700 hours local time. One of our assets in Italian intelligence got it, a technician replied. 3 weeks, the day she left, the day after the night that changed everything. And then, the technician projected the next image, a slightly different angle, the image that sentenced her. There he was, still leaving the hotel, and by his side, her back to the camera but unmistakable from the cascade of dark hair and the silhouette of the dress that was still crumpled at the bottom of her suitcase, was her. A chill ran down her spine. No one in the room seemed to notice. To them, it was just some woman, a fleeting conquest of the target. But to Cassandra, it was proof of her own damnation. The only lead the FBI had on the world's most elusive criminal incriminated her. It's a lead, she said, the words sounding like broken glass in her mouth. Any woman who gets close to him is a potential lead. I want her identified." She gave the order to hunt herself. It was the only possible move, the only way to control the narrative. The hum of the fluorescent lights dissolved into the soft sound of waves breaking against the rocks. The memory dragged her back to that terrace on the Amalfi coast. She had gone there to escape, to feel anonymous, to be just a woman, not an agent. And he was there, watching the horizon as if he could bend it to his will. He didn't occupy space. He commanded it. There was a loneliness in him, a stillness she recognized, the solitude of those who see the world from a different altitude. "A night to forget or to remember?" he had asked, without even turning as she approached, as if he had been waiting for her. "I haven't decided yet," she had replied, surprised by her own honesty. They didn't exchange names. Names belonged to the real world, a world of consequences and histories. There, in that refuge outside of time, they were just a man and a woman. They talked for hours. He had a mind like a blade, dissecting art, politics, history, with a precision that fascinated her. He listened to her, truly listened, with an intensity that made her feel like the only person in the world. "You seek order in chaos," he told her, swirling the ice in his glass of whiskey. "It's a noble but futile pursuit. Chaos always wins." "And what do you seek?" she asked. The shadow of a smile touched his lips, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I don't seek. I build. Things that last, immune to chaos." That night, in her room, with the sound of the sea as the only witness, their passion was a silent conversation, a meeting of two solitudes. It wasn't about pleasure. It was about recognition. In his arms, Cassandra didn't feel controlled or possessed. She felt seen, stripped of her badge, her duty, her name. He looked at her and saw the woman she barely remembered being. Now, back in the cold reality of the crisis room, that same gaze haunted her from the screen. But it wasn't a look of passion. It was a look of challenge. He knew. The thought hit her with the force of a physical blow. He knew exactly who she was that night. The meeting hadn't been a coincidence. It had been a move, and she, the methodical, incorruptible agent, had fallen for it like a rookie. Worse, the photo showed him leaving the hotel, with her. He had let her be seen, deliberately. The game wasn't starting now. It had been underway for weeks, and he was winning. When the meeting ended, Cassandra walked back to her desk, her steps firm and measured on the polished floor. No one could see the abyss that had opened up beneath her feet. She sat down, turned on her computer, and opened a new case file. At the top, she typed the name the world knew. Target, the Spectre. But in her mind, another name echoed. A name he had whispered against her skin in the silence before dawn. A name that now sounded like a sentence. Alaric. She looked at the woman reflected on her dark monitor screen. The face was the same, the eyes determined, the jaw clenched. But something fundamental had shifted. The question wasn't who he was. The question was, who was she now? The hunter or the accomplice? The agent or the target? The night in Washington, D.C. was a web of artificial lights and deep shadows. To Cassandra, the city had never felt so oppressive. Her apartment, once a refuge of silence and order, now felt like a glass cell. Every shadow seemed to move. Every street noise made her hold her breath. He had invaded her professional sanctuary. Now, she felt his presence in her personal one. She stood in the middle of her living room, the Spectre case file open on her tablet, his picture staring back at her. Alaric. That face was no longer that of the anonymous lover, but of a puppet master. He hadn't seduced her. He had studied her. He hadn't shared a night with her. He had recruited her for a game she didn't even know she was playing. A hot blush rose up her neck, a mixture of humiliation and a cold, sharp anger. He had used her. He had turned her moment of vulnerability into a weapon against her. Her agent's mind went to work, the only defense she had left. What was his goal? Why let himself be photographed? Why with her? The answer was as clear as it was brutal. He was marking her. He had created a link between them in the eyes of the world, even if only he and she knew the truth. It was a warning, a show of power. I can reach you anywhere. I know who you are. And the worst part? It worked. She was compromised. If she told the truth, Her career would be over. She would be accused of conspiring with the target, her life undone in a scandal of betrayal. Silence was her only option, and silence made her an accomplice. She spent hours that night dissecting every detail of the investigation, looking for a flaw, a clue that hadn't come from him. There were none. Every piece of information the FBI had on the Directorate, Alaric's empire, seemed too clean, too precise. They were breadcrumbs, left for her to follow. He wasn't running from her. He was guiding her. Guiding her where? The ringing of her cell phone made her jump. Blocked number. Protocol said to ignore it. The agent in her screamed to ignore it. But the woman who had been with him in Italy, the woman he saw, knew who it was. She answered, her heart an uncontrolled drum against her ribs. Silence. Just the sound of a calm, controlled breath on the other end of the line. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice lower than she intended. More silence, and then the subtle sound of ice clinking against a glass, a sound that instantly transported her to the terrace on the Amalfi coast. "You seek order and chaos, Agent Thorne." Alaric's voice came through, not as a whisper, but as a calm, intimate statement. There was no surprise, no threat, just acknowledgement. "I admire that, but you're looking in the wrong place." The air left her lungs. He had said her name. The final denial shattered. "What do you want?" she managed to say, her jaw tight. "I want you to win," he said, and the sincerity in his voice was the most frightening thing of all. "You're the best. That's why it's you. Keep following the leads. Arrest the men I give you. Become the hero everyone expects you to be." "And what do you get out of it?" she spat, her anger finally finding a voice. "I get rid of incompetent and disloyal competitors. And you climb the career ladder." He paused, and she could almost feel the dark smile in his voice. "And we continue our conversation." The call ended. Cassandra stood frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. His audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't just manipulating her. He was turning her into a piece on his chessboard, the queen in his game. He was using her to clean up his own empire, and with every victory he gave her, the invisible bond that tied them would tighten. She would be more compromised, more entangled in his web. In the days that followed, Alaric's prophecy came true. An anonymous tip led Cassandra's team to a warehouse in the port of Baltimore. There, they found a shipment of illegal weapons and arrested a key lieutenant of a rival cartel. The press called her brilliant. Hansen praised her in a general meeting. She felt the taste of ashes in her mouth. She was leading the hunt, but he was the one holding the leash. Their next encounter was not by phone. A week later, Cassandra was at a Justice Department charity gala, a mandatory event full of politicians and bigwigs. She felt out of place in her black silk dress, a wolf at a masquerade ball. As she reached for a glass of champagne, she felt a presence beside her, a presence that made the skin on her arms prickle before she even turned. "Black suits you, Agent Thorne," Alaric said in a low voice close to her ear. "It brings out the color of your eyes." He was flawless in a tailored tuxedo. No one looked at him twice. To everyone else there, he was just another wealthy financier, a philanthropist. Not the Spectre. Only she knew. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed, not turning, her fingers tightening on the stem of her glass so hard she wondered why it didn't break. "On the contrary, I belong in places like this much more than you do," he replied calmly. "These are my true domains. The streets are for savages." He took a glass from a passing waiter's tray. "Congratulations on the Baltimore seizure. I was impressed with your efficiency." "Don't play games with me, Alaric." "I have never played games with you, Cassandra." He used her first name, and the sound of it on his lips was both a caress and a violation. "From the first moment, I was completely honest with you." She finally turned to face him. His eyes were the same as in Italy, intense, searching. He wasn't looking at her like a target, but as an equal. "Honest?" she scoffed, keeping her voice low. "You lied about everything." "I never told a lie. You never asked my name. I never asked yours. It was a tacit agreement. Two people outside the world for one night. The fact that our worlds collided so spectacularly is not dishonesty. It's fate." He was impossible. A master of distortion, wrapping manipulation in the language of intimacy. "Stay away from me," she said, her voice a contained tremor. I can't, he replied, and for a split second, his facade of control seemed to waver. A shadow of something raw, something vulnerable, flickered in his eyes. You're the only one who saw me before you knew what I was. You didn't look at me and see a monster or a ghost. You saw a man, and I won't let that go. He moved away, melting into the crowd as silently as he had appeared, leaving her with a racing heart and a mind in turmoil. He wasn't just manipulating her for his own ends. It was more complicated, more dangerous. He wanted her in his life, not as a piece, but as a confidant. The only person in his empire of shadows who knew him in the sunlight. And that truth was more terrifying than any threat, because deep in her soul, in a place the agent in her refused to acknowledge, she felt the same fatal pull. He was chaos, and he was pulling her into the center of his storm. The cat-and-mouse game intensified, turning Cassandra's life into a psychological minefield. Every morning, she put on the armor of Special Agent Thorne, the woman in control, the hunter. But every night, in the solitude of her apartment, the armor cracked, revealing the woman who stared at the phone, half expecting, half fearing it would ring. Alaric was true to his word. The tips kept coming, always anonymous, always impeccably accurate. Cassandra's team, under her seemingly brilliant leadership, dismantled a money laundering operation in Miami and intercepted a hacker working for the Russian mob. Her reputation within the FBI soared. They saw her as a prodigy, an investigator with an almost supernatural instinct. The irony ate at her from the inside. Her success was a fraud, built on the foundations her greatest enemy provided. She wasn't the hunter. She was Alaric's best-trained hound, pointed in the direction he desired. And with every arrest, every newspaper headline that praised her, she felt filthier, more trapped. The internal conflict was tearing her apart. There were moments during the long, sleepless nights when the hatred she felt for him was a pure white flame. He had cornered her, compromised her principles, turned her life into a lie. He was the enemy, the monster she had sworn to hunt. But then, the memory of Italy would return, unbidden. The memory of the conversation, of the connection, the feeling of being understood in a way no one ever had. He had seen the loneliness in her, the pressure of being perfect, of carrying the weight of duty. And in his eyes, she hadn't seen a criminal, but a man who had built an empire from a similar solitude. The agent hated what he did. The woman missed the conversation. This duality haunted her. She found herself analyzing his moves not just as an agent, but with a personal curiosity. Why did he eliminate that particular rival? That move in the stock market, which seemed random to her team, she recognized it as his signature. Subtle, brilliant, devastating. She was starting to think like him, to anticipate his moves not by data analysis, but by a strange and dangerous intuition. The tension reached a breaking point during a strategy meeting. The team was at a dead end, trying to predict the directorate's next move. He's a ghost. There's no pattern, said Agent Miller, a weary-faced veteran. There's always a pattern, Cassandra retorted, quicker than she should have. She stood up and walked to the whiteboard, where a city map was covered in notes. We're thinking about this the wrong way. We're not looking for a criminal. We're looking for an emperor. She began to draw lines, to connect dots that seemed unrelated. A real estate investment from a shell company here. A sudden change in the leadership of a dock workers' union there. He's not interested in the quick cash from the streets. He's consolidating power. He's eliminating chaos, building something to last. The room fell silent, the agents watching her with a mixture of awe and admiration. She was quoting his words, the philosophy he had shared with her on that terrace. She was using what he had given her to hunt him. Hansen watched her with a penetrating gaze. You seem to understand how he thinks, Thorne. It's impressive. To catch a monster, you have to understand its mind, she said, the phrase sounding hollow in her own ears. That night, she felt she had crossed a line. She was no longer just reacting. She was actively participating in his game, using the intimacy he offered her as a weapon. The feeling wasn't one of victory, but of transgression. That's when the package arrived. It wasn't delivered by mail. It simply appeared at her door. a small black envelope with no return address. Her heart raced. Her training screamed about bombs, about anthrax, but she knew it was neither. It was a message. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside, there was no letter, no threat, just a single old-fashioned metal key and a slip of paper with an address, an art gallery downtown, and a time, 10 p.m., tonight. It was a trap, obvious and blatant. A summons. He was breaking his own rules, moving from anonymous tips to a scheduled meeting. Every instinct for survival and duty told her to take it to Hansen, to assemble a team, to arrest the man who dared to meet her. But she knew she couldn't. If she did, the photo of her in Italy would surface. He would expose her. He would destroy her. But there was another reason. A darker reason she barely dared to admit to herself. She wanted to go. She needed answers. She needed to face him, away from the eyes of the FBI, away from the game. She needed to understand. At 10 p.m., dressed in civilian clothes, her service weapon cold and heavy against the small of her back, Cassandra used the key to open a side door to the gallery. The place was dark, silent. The paintings on the walls were ghostly shapes in the gloom. The emergency lights cast a faint glow on the polished marble floor. He was standing in the center of the main hall, in front of a massive oil painting of Icarus falling from the sky, his wax wings melting under the sun. "I knew you would come," Alaric said without turning. His voice was calm, filling the cavernous silence of the place. "You gave me no choice," she replied, her hand hovering near her weapon. "There is always a choice, Cassandra." He finally turned to her. In the darkness, his face seemed sharper, the shadows accentuating the intensity of his gaze. "You could have brought your team. You could have turned me into a martyr. But you didn't. Why?" "Because you would have turned me into a traitor," she spat. "No." He took a step forward, and she fought the urge to step back. "Because you know it's not that simple. You wanted answers, and you wanted to see for yourself, without the distortion of your badge." He was close now. Too close. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, could catch the faint scent of whiskey and something else, something uniquely him. "You look at this painting," he said, gesturing to Icarus. "What do you see? A cautionary tale about hubris? About flying too close to the sun?" "I see a man who didn't know his limits," she said, her voice firm. "I see a man who would rather melt than live in a labyrinth," he corrected her gently. "I see a man who, for one glorious moment, touched the sun, and that for some is worth the price of the fall." The air between them crackled with the unsaid. The metaphor was clear. He was Icarus, and he was suggesting that she, with her pursuit of order and duty, was trapped in the labyrinth. "What do you want from me, Alaric?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. His gaze dropped to her lips, and for a moment she thought he was going to kiss her. The world seemed to shrink to that 3-foot space between them. Desire, irrational and self-destructive, hit her like a wave. But he didn't touch her. Instead, he raised his hand and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, the touch so light it was almost imperceptible. It was a gesture of such profound, unexpected intimacy that it disarmed her completely. "I want you to stop fighting the truth," he whispered. "The truth that this game between us is the only real thing in your life right now. The truth that you've never felt so alive." He took a step back, breaking the spell. "There's a traitor on your team, Cassandra. Someone who is selling information to my rivals. The same person who leaked the hotel photo to Italian intelligence. They want to see us both fall." The shock of the revelation hit her. A traitor. In the FBI. "Next week, you will receive a tip about a meeting at Pier 4. It will be a trap, meant for you," he continued. "Do what you do best. Turn the tables on them. Show them why you're in charge." He turned and walked toward the shadows. "Alaric," she called out, and he stopped. "Why are you telling me this?" He looked over his shoulder, and in the darkness, she could see the shadow of a sad smile. "Because I may be Icarus," he said, "but I will not let them burn your wings along with mine." He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Cassandra alone with the echo of his words, her heart beating wildly, not from fear, but from a new and terrifying emotion. He was protecting her. The man she was supposed to arrest was trying to save her, And she realized, with a terrible clarity, that the fall had already begun, and she was no longer sure she wanted to open her parachute. Alaric's revelation about a traitor in the FBI landed like a stone in Cassandra's orderly world. Suddenly, every colleague was a suspect. Every friendly glance a potential mask. The crisis room, once a place of camaraderie, became a nest of vipers. The enemy wasn't just outside. He was within the walls. The information forced her into a tacit and dangerous alliance with Alaric. He was no longer just the target. He was her only ally, the only one who knew the full truth of her situation. The irony was so sharp, it could cut. To protect her career and her life, she had to trust the man who had wrecked it in the first place. She watched her colleagues with new eyes. Miller, the cynical veteran who seemed to resent her meteoric rise. Chen, the ambitious data analyst who would have access to everything. Even Hansen, her mentor, with his unrestricted access, became a possibility in her paranoid mind. "Trust your gut, Thorne," the voice of her academy instructor echoed in her mind. But her gut was at war with itself. One part of her, the agent, screamed that Alaric was lying, manipulating her even deeper into his web. But the other part, the woman who met him in the gallery, felt the truth in his words. That warning wasn't a move. It was an act of protection. The week passed in a fog of tension. As Alaric had predicted, the tip came in. A reliable source reported a high-level meeting of the directorate at Pier 4, an abandoned warehouse on the waterfront. It was the kind of perfect lead, almost too good to be true. In the planning meeting, the excitement was palpable. This was their chance to catch not just soldiers, but perhaps the Spectre himself. "We go in full force," Hansen declared. "Thorne, you lead the assault team." Cassandra felt a chill. The trap. He said it was for her. They weren't just waiting for the directorate. They were waiting for her. "No," she said, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the excitement in the room. Everyone turned to her. "It's too obvious. An abandoned warehouse? It's a movie cliché. If the Spectre is as smart as we think, he'd never meet in a place like this." "Do you have a better suggestion?" Hansen asked, his brows furrowed. "Surveillance," she replied. "No assault team. Just 2 surveillance teams, one at each end of the pier. We'll watch, see who shows up. If it's legitimate, we can call for backup. If it's a trap, we won't have risked any agents' lives." It was a cautious, logical approach. No one could argue against agent safety. But in her mind, it was a chess move. Alaric had warned her about the board. Now she was moving the pieces. Miller snorted. "With all due respect, Thorne, sometimes you have to risk it for the reward. We've been hunting this guy for months." "And we'll continue to hunt him alive, Agent Miller," she countered coldly. Hansen pondered for a moment, then nodded. "Do it your way, Thorne. But if we miss our chance to get him, the responsibility will be mine," she finished. On the night of the operation, a cold, fine rain fell over the city, turning the harbor lights into watercolor blurs. Cassandra was in a surveillance van 500 yards from Pier 4, her eyes glued to the monitors showing the long-range camera feeds. The radio crackled with the tense silence of the other teams. The hours dragged on. The warehouse remained dark and silent. Miller in the other van was getting impatient, his voice on the radio filled with frustration. "Nothing, Thorne. It was a bad tip. We should have gone in." "Hold," was all she said, her heart beating in a slow, heavy rhythm. That's when she saw it. Not at Pier 4, but in the adjacent building. An old fish-packing plant. A single light on the 3rd floor. A window that had a perfect line of sight to the entrance of Pier 4. A sniper's perch. "All units, focus on the building east of Pier 4, 3rd floor, 4th window from the left," she said into the radio, her voice low and urgent. "I see a reflection. Could be a scope." Her van's camera zoomed in, the grainy image focusing. There it was, the unmistakable glint of a high-powered rifle scope. They weren't there for a meeting. They were there to assassinate her. "Bravo team," she ordered. "Move on the east building. Silent entry. I want whoever is in that window alive." What followed was a display of FBI efficiency. Within 10 minutes, Miller's team breached the building. There was a brief sound of a struggle over the radio, and then Miller's voice, breathless. "Target neutralized. We have 1 shooter in custody. Sniper rifle. He had a picture of you, Thorne." The air in Cassandra's van seemed to thin. Alaric hadn't lied. He had saved her. The shooter was a professional, but not a known member of any criminal organization. A mercenary. During interrogation, he said nothing. But his equipment told a story. Military-grade surveillance tech, a custom rifle. Someone with deep pockets had hired him. The real prize, however, came from the burner phone they found on him. Chen's data analysis team managed to break the encryption. There was only one number on it, which led to a phone registered to a shell company. When Chen read the name of the company's owner aloud in the crisis room the next day, Cassandra felt the floor disappear from under her. The company belonged to Mark Hansen, her boss, her mentor. The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone looked at Hansen, who turned pale, his face a mask of shock and denial. "This is ridiculous. It's a setup," he stammered. But the evidence was irrefutable. Financial records showed large payments from the shell company to the shooter's offshore account. Hansen was the traitor. He had been selling information to Alaric's rivals, trying to eliminate both sides for his own gain. The photo of Cassandra in Italy? Leaked by him to discredit her and remove her from the investigation when the time was right. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated Alaric's loyalty to her. Loyalty. The word echoed in Cassandra's mind as she watched agents, her own colleagues, arrest the assistant director of the FBI. That night, she returned to her apartment, but the feeling of violation had been replaced by a strange calm. She had saved her career, exposed the traitor. She had won, but it wasn't her victory. It was theirs. She went to the window and looked out at the city. She didn't know how, but she felt that he was watching too, from some skyscraper across town. They were connected by this secret, this shared battle. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from an unknown number. "Icarus is still flying. Be careful of the sun. A." She deleted the message, but the words remained. He wasn't just protecting her. He was warning her. His fall was still a possibility. And now, more than ever, she realized she was flying right beside him, and the labyrinth below looked less and less appealing. She was indebted to him, an FBI agent indebted to the man she was supposed to arrest. The web was tighter than ever, and it was no longer a prison. It was starting to feel like a cocoon. Hansen's fall sent shockwaves through the FBI. Cassandra, the agent who exposed him, was elevated to an almost legendary status. They saw her as incorruptible, a hero who had cleaned her own house. She was promoted, given full command of the Spectre task force. The power she was given was immense, and the loneliness that came with it was crushing. She sat in the same crisis rooms, but now the chair at the head of the table was hers. The looks from her colleagues were different, a mixture of respect, fear, and in some envy. She no longer had peers. She had subordinates. And in the midst of it all, the only man she could be honest with was her sworn enemy. Their communication changed. There were no more phone calls or secret meetings. It was more subtle. A silent dialogue waged on the battlefield of her work. Alaric stopped handing her his rivals on a silver platter. Instead, he began to test her, to teach her. A complex financial transaction would appear in the data, a puzzle that only someone who understood his philosophy of building empires could decipher. It was a message for her. By solving it, she not only took down one of his enemies, but also learned more about the architecture of his vast syndicate, the Directorate. It was a dangerous dance. To the world, she was getting closer and closer to her target, but in reality, she was becoming the world's foremost expert on the mind of Alaric. She knew his patterns, his aversion to waste, his preference for quiet power moves over ostentatious violence. She knew him, and that knowledge changed her. She began to see the world as he did, a complex system of power, full of chaos, waiting to be ordered. The line between the agent and the target was becoming dangerously blurred. One night, exhausted after an 18-hour day, she was in her office, the city lights twinkling below. She was staring at the evidence board, at his face in the center of it all. She no longer felt the initial hatred. She didn't feel the anger of manipulation. She felt a reluctant connection, a kind of professional respect that was bleeding into something personal. "What are you doing to me, Alaric?" As if in response, an encrypted email arrived on her personal laptop. It wasn't the official FBI channel. It was a channel she didn't even know existed. The sender was anonymous. The content was a single audio file. With her heart in her throat, she put on her headphones and clicked play. It wasn't Alaric's voice. It was a recording, old, the quality grainy. The voice of a young boy, maybe 10 years old, speaking to an older man. "Father, why did they take Mother?" the boy asked, his voice trembling with unshed tears. "Because they are weak men, Alaric," the man's voice replied, with an Eastern European accent. "And weak men fear strong women. They destroy what they cannot control." "It's not fair," little Alaric said. "The world is not fair," the father said. "So, you do not wait for justice. You build it. You build a world so strong, so ordered, that nothing can touch you. Nothing can be taken from you again. Do you understand me?" "Yes, father." The recording ended. Cassandra took off the headphones, her hands shaking. He had given her a piece of his past, a key not to his empire but to his soul, the origin of his obsessive quest for control, the wound that had shaped him. That little boy, crying for his mother, was the ghost in the machine, the architect of the directorate. He wasn't a monster born of evil. He was a boy who swore to build walls so high that no one could ever hurt him again. The act was one of such deep, calculated vulnerability that it left her breathless. He wasn't just playing chess anymore. He was showing himself to her, layer by layer. He was inviting her into his labyrinth, not as a hunter, but as the only person he thought could understand him. She hated herself for the tear that rolled down her cheek. It was weakness. It was compassion for the enemy. But it was undeniably real. The next day she made her move. Using the information he had indirectly given her, she uncovered a major meeting of the directorate set to take place at a luxury art auction house in Geneva, Switzerland. It was the biggest opportunity they had ever had, the chance to catch his entire inner circle at once. Her subordinates wanted to organize an international operation, a full-scale raid. "No," Cassandra said in the meeting. Her voice was calm, but filled with a new authority. "Violence begets chaos, and chaos is their playground. We will use order." She laid out a brilliant plan, not of force, but of finesse. Instead of a raid, she organized a coordinated asset freeze. Working with Swiss authorities and the U.S. Treasury, at the exact moment of the meeting, every bank account, every digital asset, every line of credit linked to Alaric's lieutenants would be frozen simultaneously. "We will take their power without firing a single shot," she explained. "An emperor is nothing without his treasury. We will turn his generals into beggars in the middle of a war council." The plan was executed perfectly. The moment the most powerful men in the directorate sat down, their financial empires evaporated. Panic set in. Loyalty built on money dissolved into accusations and mistrust. The organization imploded from the inside out, exactly as Cassandra had predicted. It was her greatest victory, a masterpiece of strategy that would be studied at Quantico for years. And it was the biggest message she could have sent to Alaric. "I understand you. I can use your own rules against you." That night, she was in her hotel room in Geneva, watching the snow fall over the lake. This time, she knew he would call. The phone rang. Block number. "Hello, Cassandra," Alaric said. There was no anger in his voice. There was admiration. "Hello, Alaric." "It was brilliant," he said, using order. "My father would have been impressed." "I learned from the best," she replied, the admission hanging in the air between them. There was a long pause. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was a space where unspoken truths could breathe. "You broke them," he said. "My inner circle, my power structure. It's in ruins." "It's my job," she said softly. "Yes, it is." He paused. "Now there's only one piece left on the board, Cassandra. The king." Her heart skipped a beat. "Do you know where I am?" she asked. "I always know where you are," he replied. "Look out your window." She went to the large glass window. Across the lake, at the top of the city's most luxurious hotel, a single light switched on in the penthouse suite. A beacon in the night. "The game is over, Cassandra," he said, his voice now lower, more intimate. "All that's left is the final conversation. Come meet me. No teams, no weapons. Just you and me, the hunter and the king. Let's finish this the way it started." The call ended. She stood there, staring at the light across the lake. It was the end of the line, Her duty was clear. Call the Swiss authorities, surround the hotel, arrest him. It was the conclusion of months of work, the culmination of her career. But she knew she wouldn't do it. Not yet. The recording of his childhood, the warning about Hansen, the touch on her face in the gallery, the dance of minds they had waged. It was no longer about duty. It was about the end of their story. She took her weapon from its holster and placed it on the nightstand. She grabbed her coat. As she stepped out into the cold Geneva night, toward the light across the lake, she finally admitted to herself the terrifying truth. She wasn't going to arrest Alaric. She was going to meet him. And she didn't know if she was going as an agent or as Cassandra. Maybe, in the end, there was no longer a difference. The crossing of the lake was like crossing the river Styx. The water taxi cut through the dark, icy water, leaving behind the safe shore of her duty and approaching the shore of the unknown. Every meter that brought her closer to that solitary light atop the hotel was a conscious step away from the woman she used to be. The cold Swiss night air was sharp, but what made her shiver was the war within her. The hotel lobby was a sanctuary of quiet luxury. Marble, gold, and the muffled sound of discreet conversations. No one stopped her. The private elevator to the penthouse suite was waiting, its door open like an invitation. He had prepared the way. Every detail, as always, was under his control. The elevator ascended in a swift silence. Cassandra watched the numbers change, each floor a beat of her heart. She had no plan. For the first time in her professional life, she was operating without protocol. She was acting on instinct, on a visceral need to see this story reach its end. The elevator doors opened directly into the suite. The space was vast, minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Geneva and the snow-capped Alps beyond. The only sound was the soft melody of a cello playing from an unseen sound system. And he was there, not in a suit or a tuxedo, but in dark trousers and a gray cashmere sweater. He was barefoot, a glass of whiskey in hand, standing before the window, watching the city. He didn't look like a king in his castle, but a man in his self-imposed cell. He turned as the door slid shut. His gaze was not that of an adversary, nor even a lover. It was of someone who had been waiting for a very long time. "Cassandra," he said, his voice calm. "Alaric." She remained near the door, the space between them charged with the weight of everything that had happened. Italy, the game, the arrests, the changed lives. It had all led them to this moment, to this room. "You came alone," he observed. It wasn't a question. "You knew I would," she replied. "I hoped," he corrected her gently. "Hope is a dangerous variable. I usually avoid it." He gestured to a leather armchair near the fireplace. "Please." She didn't move. "Why, Alaric? Why all of this? The game, the clues, bringing me here. You could have disappeared 1,000 times." "Disappearing is running," he said, taking a step toward her. "I don't run, I control. And I realized there was one thing I couldn't control. You." He stopped a few feet from her. "In Italy, for one night, I wasn't the specter. I was just a man talking to a woman on a terrace. And it was real. More real than any empire I've ever built. When I found out who you were, I had a choice. Destroy you and disappear, or see what would happen." "So you played with me," she said, the accusation lacking force. "I danced with you," he replied. "I tested you. I taught you. I wanted to see if the woman I met in Italy could survive the world of the agent she used as a shield. And you didn't just survive. You thrived. You became more than they ever expected you to be. You destroyed my world," she whispered, the confession escaping her. "I destroyed your cage," he said, his voice filled with a passionate conviction. "You weren't made to follow orders, Cassandra. You were made to give them. You weren't made to follow patterns. You were made to create them. I didn't destroy anything. I just showed you who you really are." It was a distortion, a masterful manipulation. But deep in her heart, a part of her wondered if he was right. She had never felt so powerful, so in control of her own destiny, as she had in the last few months. "And now?" she asked. "What happens now? I arrest you? You kill me?" The shadow of a smile touched his lips. "We finish the conversation." He closed the distance between them, and this time, She didn't retreat. He stood right in front of her, so close she could see the reflection of the fireplace flames in his eyes. He didn't touch her. The space between them vibrated. "I'm going to turn myself in, Cassandra," he said in a low voice. The shock hit her. Of all the possibilities she had considered, that wasn't one of them. "What?" "My empire is broken. My lieutenants are either in jail or have betrayed me. The game is over. The king is in checkmate," he spoke with a calm resignation. "But the outcome of the match depends on who captures the king." He raised his hand, not to touch her, but to gesture toward the phone in her pocket. "You can make the call. Bring your colleagues. You'll be the agent who brought down the Spectre. Your legend will be complete. You will have the order you've always sought." She stared at him, her mind spinning. This was it. The victory. The end. Everything she had ever wanted. So why did it feel like a defeat? "What's the other option?" she asked, her voice barely audible. His eyes locked with hers, and the intensity there held her captive. "The other option is that there is no capture. The Spectre disappears tonight, killed in an escape attempt, perhaps. A clean end for your files." "And you?" she asked, her heart pounding. "Alaric survives," he whispered, "and he starts over, somewhere far away, somewhere he no longer needs to build walls." He paused, the weight of his final offer hanging in the air. "And he waits." "Waits for what?" "For you," he said, his voice raw with a vulnerability she had never heard. "So that one day, when you grow tired of your labyrinth of order, when you realize the legend they've built for you is just another cage, you'll know there's a place in the world where you don't have to be an agent, where you can just be Cassandra." The choice was impossible. Duty versus desire. Order versus chaos. The life she had built versus the life he was offering. He saw the struggle on her face. Gently he took her hand. His skin was warm. The first touch since Italy. It was like lightning, sending a shock through her entire body. He led her to the balcony. The cold night air enveloped them. Below them, the city was a carpet of lights. "Look at it, Cassandra," he said, his voice beside her ear. "Order, control, it's beautiful, and it's an illusion. The only real thing is the moment, is the choice." He released her hand and took a step back, leaving her at the edge of the balcony, facing the world. "The choice is yours," he said. "The phone is in your pocket. The legend is waiting, or the door behind you is open, and a new beginning is waiting too." He turned and walked back into the suite, leaving her alone with the night, the cold wind, and the weight of two worlds on her shoulders. She stood there for what felt like an eternity, the wind whipping her hair. She thought of her career, her oath, everything she had fought for, and she thought of him, the man who saw her, who challenged her, who freed her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up, showing the faces of her contacts. Hansen, Miller, FBI headquarters. She looked at the solitary light that was her hotel across the lake, and then she looked at the open door of the suite, at the inviting darkness where Alaric waited. Icarus in the labyrinth. She took a deep breath of the cold alpine air, and she made her choice. Cassandra's decision was not a lightning bolt, but a slow dawn. Standing on that balcony, with the fate of two worlds at her fingertips, she realized a fundamental truth. Both options were a form of prison. Arresting Alaric meant shackling herself forever to the legend of Agent Thorne, a hero forged in secrets and manipulation. Her life would become a performance, every accolade a reminder of her complicity. It was a victory that would leave her empty. Going with him, on the other hand, meant abandoning everything she knew, becoming a fugitive, chaining her future to his. It was a surrender to the chaos she had spent her life fighting. And so she chose a third way, her way. She turned and walked back into the suite. Alaric was standing by the fireplace, his back to her, watching the flames dance. He didn't turn, granting her the dignity of that moment. Cassandra walked to a desk, picked up a piece of hotel stationery and a pen. Her hands were steady. Her mind, for the first time in months, was clear. She wrote a short, concise note. Then, she took her badge and her FBI credentials from her purse and placed them on top of the note. Finally, she removed the chip from her cell phone and crushed it under the heel of her boot. "The Spectre died tonight," she said, her voice echoing in the quiet room. He fell from the balcony while trying to escape capture. The case is closed. Alaric turned slowly. His eyes searched hers, trying to decipher her final move in the game. And the agent who captured him? He asked softly. She disappeared, Cassandra replied. Shocked by the events, perhaps. Tired of the game, she resigned, renounced her legend. She looked at the badge on the desk, and then at him. There will be no manhunt. Not for you, not for me. The story ends here. Clean. A slow, deep understanding washed over Alaric's face. She hadn't chosen him, nor had she chosen the FBI. She had chosen herself. She had found freedom not in one of his options, but by wiping the entire chessboard clean. And what happens to Cassandra? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. She's going to find out, she said, for the first time, without a badge or a target to define her. She walked toward him, stopping just a step away. The tension between them was no longer that of a hunter and her prey, but of two survivors, two souls who had seen each other in the darkness and stepped out into an uncertain light. What you offered me, Alaric, a life waiting for me, is just another gilded cage, she said, her voice soft but unyielding. And what I represented to you, a life of order and duty, was the labyrinth you wanted to escape. We are not each other's salvation. We are the catalyst. He watched her, the admiration in his eyes overpowering any disappointment he might have felt. She wasn't the woman he expected to follow him into exile. She was so much more. She was the woman who found her own way out. So this is it, he said. A goodbye. It's a beginning, she corrected him. She raised her hand and for the first time touched him of her own volition. Her hand on his face was firm, the gesture intimate but not romantic. It was an acknowledgement, a farewell. Thank you, Alaric, for showing me the door to my own labyrinth. He closed his eyes for an instant, savoring the touch. When he opened them again, resignation had given way to a new resolve. Where will you go? He asked. I don't know. And that's the most beautiful part of it. She smiled, a genuine, free smile he had never seen before. She stepped away, walking toward the elevator. Every step was light, unburdened by duty or desire. Cassandra, he called out one last time. She stopped, her hand on the elevator door, and looked back at him. If you ever decide you don't want to be alone anymore, he began, I'll know how to find you, she finished for him. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. A door left ajar, not to the future, but to possibility. She stepped into the elevator and the doors closed, leaving Alaric alone in the suite, the silence filled only by the crackling of the fire. He looked at the badge on the desk, and then at the city outside. She hadn't arrested him. She had freed him from his game, from his obsession. In the end, the hunter had given her prey the ultimate gift, anonymity. Cassandra stepped out into the Geneva night, not as an agent, not as a fugitive, but simply as a woman. No name, no past, just the present. Exactly as she had felt that first day on the Amalfi coast. The circle was complete. She didn't know where the road would take her, whether to a small town in the Alps or a bustling metropolis on the other side of the world. But as she walked through the silent, snow-dusted streets, under a sky full of stars, she felt at peace. The war was over, and for the first time, she felt that the order she had so desperately sought was not in the outside world, but within herself. And that was a foundation upon which she could, finally, begin to build something real, something that would last. 6 months later, the Tuscan sun was warm and generous. It bathed the green hills, the rows of vineyards, and the ancient stone villas in a golden, sleepy light. In one of these villas, nestled among cypress trees, a woman had her hands in the earth. The soil was rich and dark under her fingernails, the scent of basil and rosemary hanging in the air. Cassandra, though she rarely used that name now, preferring the sound of cassia that her Italian neighbors gave her, had found a rhythm dictated not by cases or deadlines, but by the rising and setting of the sun, by the changing of the seasons. Her life, once a complex equation of strategy and risk, had become a simple poetry of physical labor and simple pleasures. She hadn't run away. She had rediscovered herself, the woman who existed before the FBI, before the oath, before the weight of the world. The woman who liked the smell of rain on dry earth and the taste of wine she had helped harvest herself. The FBI had accepted her resignation with bewilderment and regret. The official story, the one she left behind, was one of burnout. The legendary Agent Thorne, broken by the case that made her famous, had chosen anonymity over glory. It was a clean, tragic, and most importantly, closed narrative. They stopped looking for her. As for Alaric, the world believed the specter was dead. The news of his fall from a Geneva hotel was a discreet footnote in the financial papers, the quiet end of a ghost. No body was recovered from the icy lake, but to the world, the king was dead. The Directorate's empire unraveled into infighting and arrests, just as Cassandra had planned. Sometimes at night, sitting on her veranda with a glass of Chianti, she would think of him. She wondered where he was, what life he was building. She didn't miss the danger, or the game, but she missed the conversation, the feeling of having her mind matched, challenged. He was a ghost in her memory, just as he was to the rest of the world, a potent reminder of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. One day, while at the small village market buying fresh bread, she saw a newspaper. It was an international paper, left behind by a tourist. In the business section, a small article caught her eye. It spoke of a mysterious investor who was buying up degraded land in remote regions of Patagonia and turning it into protected nature reserves. A philanthropist who operated through proxies, whose real name no one knew. His nickname in the financial world, due to his elusive nature, was the Guardian. The article mentioned his philosophy: to build something that lasts, immune to chaos. Cassandra felt a smile touch her lips, a smile that was just for her. He was okay. He wasn't building an empire of power, but one of legacy, a different kind of order. The boy who lost everything was now protecting what was left. She bought the newspaper and took it home, not out of sentimentality, but as a nod of acknowledgement across the world. The game was over, but the chess match of their lives continued, on separate boards, with new rules. That afternoon, an old, dusty car pulled up in front of her villa. An elderly man, the local postman, got out with a package. "Signora Cassia," he greeted her with a smile. "This arrived for you. No postmark, just an address." It was a simple wooden box. She thanked the postman and took it inside. There was no return address. She didn't need one. With her heart beating a little faster, she opened the box. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, lay a single object, a small glass bottle containing an amber liquid. Beside it, a small card. On it, in an elegant, familiar script, was written, "Whiskey from the Isle of Islay, with notes of sea salt, for nights when you miss the conversation." There was no signature. It didn't need one. She picked up the bottle. The weight was solid in her hand. It wasn't an invitation. It wasn't an attempt to bring her back. It was a memento, an acknowledgement that what they had shared, that connection forged in the fire of danger and secrecy, was real. And it hadn't disappeared. It had just transformed. She didn't drink the whiskey. She placed it on a shelf in her kitchen, next to jars of olive oil and dried herbs. A reminder that chaos and order could coexist, that even the most dangerous ghosts could, in the end, become silent guardians. As the sun set over the Tuscan hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Cassandra sat on her veranda. She no longer felt like Icarus, or someone trapped in a labyrinth. She felt like the owner of the hill, watching over her small piece of the world, at peace. Their story didn't have the ending of a romance novel, with the lovers running off into the sunset together. It had a much rarer and truer ending, an ending where they both found not each other, but themselves, and that, she realized, was the only victory that mattered. 2 years passed. Cassia's life in Tuscany deepened, her roots taking hold in the earth with the same stubbornness as her grapevines. She was no longer a visitor, a stranger hiding out. She was part of the landscape. She knew the name of every shopkeeper, the cry of every child, the way the morning light hit the valley. The peace she cultivated was real, earned with labor and time. But even in the most well-tended garden, the seeds of the past can lie dormant. The seed sprouted on a Tuesday morning in the form of a familiar face. She was at the village cafe, reading a book, when she felt a gaze on her. She looked up, and her blood ran cold. Sitting at a table across the small piazza was Agent Miller, her former colleague from the FBI. He didn't look older, just more tired, the cynicism in his eyes etched into permanent lines. He didn't approach her. He just watched her over the rim of his coffee cup. It was a look she knew well, the look of a hunter who has finally found his prey. Panic was a quick, cold wave, but years of training suppressed it before it could reach the surface. She didn't run. She showed no recognition. She just finished her coffee with deliberate calm, paid her bill, and walked home, feeling the weight of his gaze on her back with every step. The past wasn't dead, it was just waiting. She locked the door of her villa, the sound of the deadbolt echoing in the silence. Her mind, once occupied with tomato sauce recipes and the right time for pruning, switched back to the analytical machine it once was. Why now? Who sent him? Was it the FBI? Or something worse? The answer came after nightfall. She was sitting in the darkness, a heavy kitchen knife on the table, when she heard a soft knock at the door. "I know you're in there, Thorne." Miller's voice came, muffled by the wood. "I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to ask for help." She hesitated, her heart hammering. This wasn't part of any protocol she knew. Slowly, she opened the door. Miller looked like a ghost in the porch light. "Can I come in?" he asked. She let him in, but didn't offer him a seat. They stood in the middle of her living room, two worlds colliding. "What do you want, Miller?" "The directorate didn't die with the Spectre," he said, getting straight to the point. "A new leader took over, someone more brutal, without your friend's finesse. They're cleaning up loose ends. People who knew too much about the old structure." He paused. "People like me. People like you." Cassandra felt a knot form in her stomach. "They've tried to kill me twice already," Miller continued. "I'm out of the agency. I'm on my own. They think I know where the Spectre's remaining funds are hidden. His personal fortune. They think you know, too." "I don't know anything," she said, and it was the truth. "They won't believe that," Miller shot back. "They're hunting everyone who touched the Spectre case, and they're not like him, Thorne. They don't play chess. They just burn the board." He watched her, his tired eyes searching for a glimpse of the agent she used to be. "I came to you because you were the only one who understood him, the only one who was a step ahead. I need your help to disappear. And you need to disappear again, deeper than you've ever been." The garden, the peace, the life she had built. It all felt like it was dissolving, turning to smoke. The chaos she thought she had left behind had found her in her sanctuary. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, her voice cold. "Because I don't have anyone else," he said with brutal honesty. "And because deep down, you know I'm telling the truth. You can't grow vegetables forever, Thorne. You're a wolf, and the hunters are back in your forest." After he left, leaving a burner phone number on the table, Cassandra stayed up all night. Miller's offer was a poison. Helping him meant returning to the world of shadows, of false identities, of looking over her shoulder. It meant becoming a ghost once more. Refusing, however, was a death sentence. The new directorate wouldn't leave her alone. They would hunt her to the ends of the earth. At dawn, she walked to her kitchen. Her eyes landed on the shelf, on the small bottle of whiskey, for nights when you missed the conversation. She had never felt further from that conversation than she did now. He had built a legacy of conservation. She, a life of peace. And now, the demons of their past were threatening to burn it all down. She knew what she had to do. It wasn't about helping Miller. It was about protecting the peace she had fought so hard to find. And there was only one person in the world who understood the architecture of the directorate well enough to dismantle it from the inside. One person who had just as much to lose as she did if their past was unearthed. She didn't have his number. She didn't have his address. But she had something better. She had the name he was using to build his new world. The Guardian. She went to her laptop, a device she rarely used. She opened a secure browser and began to type. She wasn't looking for Alaric. She was looking for a way to send a message. She found the website for one of his charitable foundations in Patagonia. Under the donation section, there was an option to leave a message along with the donation. She made a small anonymous donation, and in the message field she wrote just 5 words. 5 words that only he and the entire world would understand. "The crows are in the vineyard. It was a phrase he had said to her in Italy, as they watched the birds circling over the hills, a metaphor for trouble looming on the horizon. She sent the message and closed the laptop. She didn't know if he would see it, didn't know if he would respond, but she had played her final piece. She had sent a signal to the only other player left in the game. As she packed a small bag with cash, a fake passport, and the essentials, she felt a strange sense of calm. The piece of Tuscany was beautiful, but maybe Miller was right. Maybe she was never meant to be a gardener. Maybe her nature wasn't to cultivate, but to hunt, and the hunters were back in her forest. 3 days. 3 days of tense silence. Cassandra, or Cassia, or whoever she was now, lived in a state of high alert. Every passing car, every unfamiliar face in the market, was a potential threat. The peace of her Tuscan villa had become a fragile facade over an abyss of danger. She had contacted Miller, agreeing to meet him in Rome, but she put off leaving, waiting for a sign, an echo from the ghost. On the evening of the 3rd day, she was sitting on her veranda, the darkness of the Italian countryside complete, when she heard it, the subtle, almost imperceptible hum of an electric engine, a luxury car, moving silently up the gravel road to her home. It wasn't Miller. His style was more boisterous. She didn't run inside for a weapon. She didn't hide. She just remained seated, an untouched glass of wine on the table, and waited. The car stopped. The headlights died. A dark silhouette emerged and walked toward her. He didn't move like an assassin, with stealth, nor like a cop, with authority. He moved with a quiet familiarity, like someone coming home. He stopped at the foot of the veranda steps, the faint light from the house carving his face from the shadows. It was Alaric. Older, perhaps. There were lines of concern around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and his hair was a little grayer at the temples. But the intensity in his gaze was the same one that had held her on a terrace in Italy, in a gallery in D.C., in a hotel suite in Geneva. "Crows, Cassandra?" he said, his voice a low baritone that seemed to belong to the night. "I thought we agreed on a more poetic retirement." "Poetry doesn't disarm assassins," she replied, her heart beating a steady, strong rhythm. He climbed the steps and stopped in front of her. They didn't touch. They just watched each other, filling the years of silence with a single look. "They found you," he said. It wasn't a question. "They found Miller. He found me. And now you bring them to me," he concluded, no accusation in his voice, just an acknowledgement of the facts. "You built the house, Alaric," she said softly. "I'm just telling you there are burglars in the hallway." He nodded, his gaze wandering over her garden, the vineyards in the distance. "You've built something beautiful here. They'll burn it all. Your reserve in Patagonia, my life here. They won't stop until they have what they think you've hidden," she said. Alaric brought his gaze back to her. "I've hidden nothing. The money all went to the foundations. They're hunting a ghost. Try explaining that to them." He was silent for a long moment, the strategist inside him calculating the odds, analyzing the new chessboard that had been forcefully placed before them. "What's your plan?" he finally asked. "Run with Miller? Disappear again?" "My plan was to warn you," she said honestly. "After that, I don't know." He took a step closer, and the familiar air between them crackled. "I have a plan," he said. "It's the same plan as always. We don't run, we don't hide, we finish it." "We?" she repeated, the word hanging in the air. "They want what was mine. They're using my strategies, perverting my philosophy of order," he said, a cold, controlled fury hardening his voice. "They're using my name, my legacy, to create the kind of chaos I spent my life trying to eliminate. This isn't just an attack on us, Cassandra. It's a personal offense." He looked at her, and deep in his eyes, she saw not the specter, the crime lord, nor the guardian, the philanthropist. She saw the boy who swore to build something that would last, and the new leaders of the directorate were scrawling graffiti on the walls of his castle. "What are you proposing?" she asked. "I'm proposing we stop being ghosts and become hunters once more," he said. "You and I, together. We won't dismantle the directorate. We will eradicate it. We'll burn their chessboard, as you said. We'll show them what happens when they corner 2 wolves they thought were tamed." The offer was madness. It was an invitation back into the darkness, the violence, everything she had left behind. But it was also the only way out. Not an escape, but a cleansing. A chance to finish the past once and for all, so they could both have a future. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do this? You could disappear. They'd never find you." "Because they came for you," he said simply, as if it were the only answer that mattered. "They walked into your garden, and no one walks into your garden." The statement was so fiercely protective, so undeniably possessive, that it took her breath away. She looked at her home, at her vineyards, at the peaceful life she loved, and she knew she would never be truly at peace as long as there was a single piece from the old game still in play. "Okay, Alaric," she said, the decision solidifying. "Let's go hunting." A slow, dangerous, and terribly familiar smile spread across his face. The Spectre was back, and this time, he wasn't playing against the FBI agent. He was playing alongside her. The end of their story wouldn't be in a Tuscan sunset. It would be in fire. And maybe, just maybe, whatever emerged from the ashes would be something they could both call home. He held out his hand, not for a handshake, not for a caress, but an invitation, to stand up and join him. Cassandra placed her hand in his. His skin was warm, his grip firm. It was the beginning of the end, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She was home. The war had come back for her, and she realized that perhaps the war was where she always belonged, beside him.